Hey guys, what's going on? Sean here at HHP, giving you guys another quick how-to video here and a quick review on the Holley 302-3 LS Swap oil pan. Now this is one of their latest oil pans here from their lineup. They've been making pans for a while. I actually use a lot of the Holley pans, and this pan in particular that they just came out with, it actually gives it more clearance to run up to a 4-inch stroke. Now I've been using their other pans that don't have this large clearance here. Show you guys this side. This is where they clearance it for that up to 4-inch stroke. I've been using their other pans that don't have that large clearancing. I go in there and I clearance it out myself. So I'd be willing to bet that this pan here will probably work with a little bit bigger than a 4-inch stroke, maybe a 4.1, maybe a 4.125. I don't know. I'm going to try it out on a 4.125-inch stroke soon, and then I'll report back to you guys and let you know how the fitment was on that. But I know based off of using the other pans with a 4-inch stroke that this one here with the additional clearancing should be able to fit maybe up to a 4.125. I'm not sure, but that's to be determined. I'm pretty sure they don't say it does just to cover their ass. You know, they don't want anybody running too close or having any knocking issues. So this is something that you got to kind of do a trial and error on yourself. Okay, back to the pan. So this new pan here, like I said, they have the extra clearancing here for the strokers, and then they also have a turbo or whatever type of external oil type of feed you may need. This is a return for that. So this is an oil drain back right here for turbos or any other type of oil and type of external thing you might have where you want to return oil. You can return it right there. Now I've already moved ahead and installed some of the small parts that come with the small parts bag. I've installed this threaded insert here, which is where you thread on the late model style oil filter, like a PF48 or a 2013 Corvette style oil filter. It comes with this oil passes block off and gasket. I've installed that as well. And it also comes with this simple baffle here, which really isn't a baffle at all. It just separates the oil down here from this area up here. They do make an upgrade for this that comes with little flap doors and stuff for like autocross and pro touring type stuff. But so far with what I've been doing, I've had pretty good luck with this setup here. Also comes with the drain plug. So that's pretty much that on the 302-3 pan, and the differences that it has compared to the other ones. So I'll be replacing this. This is a brand new LSA crate engine here, and this is a 2010 and up style, 5th gen style Camaro oil pan. Pretty much doesn't really fit anything that I'm trying to put this engine into. So this big goofy pan will be coming off and being swapped out for the Holley 302-3. I'm going to show you guys the ins and outs of that right now. So before you go ahead and try to get this oil pan off, make sure you got your oil drain. Hell, before you even flip the engine upside down, just make sure you have the oil drained out adequately. And, it just limits your mess that you make. Now the Holley pans don't come with a new oil pan gasket. So if I'm working on a brand new crate engine, what I like to do sometimes is I'll remove the oil pan gasket rivets from the factory oil pan and reuse that oil pan gasket, assuming that I was able to get it off the engine without damaging it. And that's one thing you want to take note of when removing the pan, if you want to save the gasket, is you want to try to make sure you don't bend and tweak that gasket when you remove it. Basically, you're gonna come in here and loosen up that RTV gasket that the RTV sealer that the factory uses. You'll find that the rear areas have a little bit more heavy RTV sealer. And that's the areas you want to look out for back here. Now it's pretty much ready to come up. All right. The rivets that I mentioned to you, you can see right here. There's two, one there and one here. If you just simply drill those rivets out with a small drill bit, you can reuse this brand new nice gasket. It's still nice and thick. It's not flattened out. You can kind of see that raised edge there. Go ahead and get all this factory stuff out the way so you don't run into any seal issues later. You can reseal it on the way in. Next step in installing the Holley 302-3 is going to be to remove the factory oil pickup tube, which you can remove by removing the 10mm bolt there and 13mm nut there and 13mm nut there. Actually, all of these 13mm will be coming out because you'll need to remove the windage tray here to modify it to fit the 302-3 pan, which has the low clearance in the front, which has the best clearance in a swap application for steering arms and stuff like that. You're going to need to cut across this area here, and then it's going to be a notch in this area here. I'll show you guys how that's done as well. All right. One thing I want to say. All right, guys. Back here with the windage tray off. I got the fan running in the background. Please excuse the noise. It's about 100 degrees here in Texas, so again, apologize for the fan noise. But basically, once you get your windage tray off, you want to go ahead and mark the front of it like this. You're going to be making a cut across, and then you're going to be making a cut down and around here for a notch for the tube to fit. One thing you want to make sure of is that if you didn't take note of how you took this thing off, some are marked front and some are marked rear right here. This one is marked front, and it was obvious to me how I took it off. But if you don't know, just check to make sure that you're cutting it in the front and not the rear. It should say rear here, or it should say front here, and you want to make that cut in the front of this pan to have the clearance for this low area here. So I'm going to go ahead and make that cut. Now you want to get a designated area to make this cut. I'm going to be using a cutoff wheel, nothing fancy, but I'm going to be in an area where I won't be throwing any sparks or anything into my open engine right here behind me. This is how the engine is looking right now with no windage tray on it. First cut done. Now we got to get our notch out of there. Alright, and that's pretty much how it's done right there. As you can see, I got my straight cut and I have my notch. Now it's time to clean it up. I'm going to be using a wire wheel and some engine cleaner, and we want to make sure we get all the debris and all the particles off of there before reinstalling it. Alright, so now we have everything clearance perfectly for the pickup tube to fit, as well as the low clearance oil pan area in the front. The way I like to install these pickup tubes is I like to install the O-ring onto the pickup tube first. Make sure it's lubricated enough to slip in easily. You just want to go ahead and start wiggling it down into position. You'll know when it sits nicely because the flange will be flat against the oil pump. You want to take note of this very closely because I've seen situations where somebody pinches their oil pickup O-ring and it causes them to have oil pressure issues because it's sucking up air and stuff like that. So make sure you have the flange flat against the oil pump before tightening the two bolts down. If you have the front timing cover on the engine like most people will, I'm in the middle of doing a cam swap, so I have the front timing cover off right now. But if you didn't, this bolt here would be very hard to get to. Not very hard, but pretty tricky to get to unless you had a magnet to get it down in position. I've actually myself dropped this bolt down in here and was forced to remove harmonic balancers, timing covers, water pumps, just to get this bolt back because it was jammed up. So be careful when tightening this bolt if you have the timing cover on there. The factory pickup usually only has one bolt. This one has two, so it's added security and a little bit more insurance. Last but not least, we'll be putting a nut right there. All right. So this is pretty much how the setup looks right before getting ready to put the oil pan gasket and oil pan back on. We have the pickup set up nicely on here, and the thing I like about the Holley setup is you don't have to worry about the clearance between this and the bottom of the oil pan and whether you're going to be too tight or too loose. All of those measurements they've already done and taken into account, and as long as you're using it with a stock windage tray with the stock hardware and everything, you will be fine straight out of the box. No additional measurements needed. But if you're running a stroker and you say you modify the windage tray or you space it up to give it more clearance, then of course that'll affect where the pickup tube lands. So if you do space up the windage tray to give better clearance for a stroker engine, then you need to maybe cut this and re-weld it, or modify it in a way that this pickup is the same exact distance from the bottom of the pan. That'll save you a whole lot of money and headache down the line. As I mentioned earlier, we had the factory oil pan gasket on that factory oil pan. I got that removed. I removed the rivets, removed the gasket without any damage, and now we're pretty much ready to reuse it on the new Holley pan. You just want to go through and clean up any RTV gasket that the factory had left behind that may cause you to have a sealing issue. I know some people opt to put gasket sealer throughout this whole area, and in my past years I've done that, but to tell you the truth, it's really not necessary. The factory gasket here is very good and is adequate in sealing. The only place you really need to add any sealer is right in the joints here where the front and rear timing cover meet. But other than that, you really don't need any additional gasket sealers or anything like that, because the gasket, the oil pan gasket from the factory is pretty adequate. And if you do have an engine that's pushing out oil at this area over the top of the oil pan gasket, then more than likely you got a bigger issue, like you got a worn out engine, or you got some really bad PCV issues. But you should never really have to worry about oil spitting out past this gasket. And if you do, something is really not right. Let's go ahead and sit that down like that. What you want to make sure of is that you want to make sure that pickup tube is not coming in contact with anything, and you want to make sure that you can get all your bolts in without anything being bound up. So this one feels pretty good. All right, real quick, I ran into a small problem. I've dealt with a million of these oil pans, but apparently you always learn something new. Apparently, as you can see here, you got to modify the windage tray this way. I made my cut across the front here of that bump, and as you can see here, they want you to bring it back this way. Now, because I didn't cut that way, they want this actually cut back into here and then in here, so this whole little bump here is gone. If you'll notice on my oil pan here, you can see a small mark here. I was noticing that it wasn't exactly sitting flat and it wasn't exactly happy. So time to take all of this back off, take the oil pickup back out, take the windage tray back out, modify this, and then we'll be back in. When it comes to torquing the pan down, you want to make sure you use a nice crisscross pattern, and you don't want to cinch it down too tight on one area before you get the whole thing kind of gradually torqued down. Another thing is, you saw that I don't have a front timing cover on here right now. So that being said, once you do install your front timing cover down the line, after this oil pan is completely torqued, you want to make sure that you bring the timing cover down towards the oil pan first with the front two bolts before tightening down the front timing cover bolts. If you tighten down the front timing cover bolts in the front before you bring it down with the two lower bolts, you more than likely will definitely crack the oil pan at this area right here. So basically what I was saying is you want to tighten these two bolts down in the front cover to bring it close to the pan, because if you don't, there'll be a small gap here, and once you go to tighten these bolts, you'll actually crack the pan here and it'll leak like a you know what. So just make sure that you so you just want to make sure that you tighten the front timing cover down to the oil pan first. Something that simple could cost you a whole lot of a headache. Not doing it could cost you a lot of headache. Doing it right could save you a lot in the long run. All right. And this pretty much concludes the Holley 302-3 oil pan install today. I hope you guys were entertained and picked up a little bit of knowledge. It's a pretty straightforward install, other than having to modify the windage tray and, you know, cut that to get the clearance you need. So leave a comment, let me know what you think, let me know if it helped you out, and yeah, good luck with the rest of y'all builds. Holley 302-3.